Hey guys, tonight we find ourselves stepping into the echoing stone halls of a medieval courthouse, where torchlight flickers against crumbling walls and the air smells faintly of parchment, sweat, and candle wax. The benches creak under the weight of peasants shifting nervously, their faces lit in gold and shadow, while the bailiff clanks his staff against the flagstone to hush the crowd. You stand there, the rough wool of your cloak scratching at your neck, waiting to hear the judgment of the local lord. It feels heavy, serious, dramatic, until you realize the crime on trial is something utterly ridiculous, like baking bread that doesn't meet the official size of a loaf. The air grows thick with anticipation. A farmer to your left leans in and whispers that his neighbor once had to defend himself because his pig looked too fat for winter. You almost laugh, but the grim set of the bailiff's jaw reminds you that laughter in this chamber could earn you a fine or worse. The absurdity presses in on you. Imagine if, today, you were hauled before a judge because your sandwich bread was cut too thin, or your dog looked too stylish in its collar. Medieval times were dead serious about things that sound hilariously petty to us now. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your location and your current time in the comments. I'd love to see where and when you're tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The bailiff raises his hand, and the first case begins. A baker shuffles forward, clutching a loaf under his arm. The crowd cranes their necks as the loaf is weighed against the standard breadstone, a hunk of carved granite kept for exactly this purpose. The loaf is too light by a handful of crumbs. Gasps ripple through the room as if someone had stolen the crown jewels. The baker protests, saying the flour had been short that week, the miller delayed by rain. But excuses mean little here. The punishment? A fine, or worse. To be dragged through the market with the faulty bread tied around his neck, shamed for all to see. You can almost hear the whispers in the room. Bread is sacred. Bread is law. Next, a young woman approaches. Her crime? Selling ale without permission. She bows her head as the judge eyes her sternly. The tavern down the road had the king's license, while she simply brewing to help her family had broken an ironclad law. The irony is sharp. Ale was safer to drink than water in these days, yet selling it without royal approval was enough to put your livelihood at risk. You glance at her shaking hands and wonder how many other villagers have been pulled in for such harmless deeds. The cases keep rolling, each more absurd than the last. A tailor fined because his customer wore silk above his station. A shepherd scolded because his flock grazed too close to the lord's private meadow, though the sheep didn't know boundaries. And just as your mind begins to wander, the judge clears his throat for the next bizarre accusation. A man who dared to plough his field on a Sunday. The murmur grows louder. This is serious. Labour on the wrong holy day was seen as almost a crime against heaven itself. You picture the man, sweaty and tired, just trying to prepare his crops before the rain, now standing accused as if he were plotting treason. The walls seem to tighten, stone pressing closer, as the weight of these strange laws settles over you. You shift in your seat, realizing that in this time, almost anything you did what you ate, wore, sold, or even when you worked, could become the reason you faced judgment. The court grows restless as the accused farmer steps forward, hat clutched tightly in his calloused hands. His shoulders slump with the weight of both exhaustion and embarrassment. You notice the mud still caked on his boots, proof he'd been dragged straight from his fields. His crime? Ploughing on a holy day. His lips tremble as he explains that the rain had been relentless, the soil turning to muck, and this one Sunday morning offered the only window to save his crops. To him, it was survival. To the court, it was defiance. The judge leans forward, eyes narrowing, the flickering torchlight catching the edges of his stern face. He quotes scripture, as though the heavens themselves demanded obedience, his voice booming in the vaulted chamber. The farmer's plea fades under the weight of holy words. The crowd shifts, murmuring. Some nod in agreement, others glance away uneasily. You feel the tension pressing in. It's less about the field, and more about control the court, ensuring everyone remembers who truly commands their lives, even down to when they till the earth. Then comes a case so ridiculous you almost think the scribe has misread the parchment. A merchant is accused of selling cloth in colours reserved for nobility. The law of the land dictated that peasants must wear muted tones, greys, browns, the occasional dark green. But this merchant dared to trade a bolt of crimson-dyed wool to a humble miller's wife. Crimson, the shade of dukes and knights, of feasts and banners, and here it was, stitched into a dress for a woman who spent her days grinding flour. The courtroom gasps, as if the devil himself had paraded in. You watch the miller's wife, standing awkwardly in her forbidden gown, cheeks burning as whispers spread. She looks both proud and terrified, her hands smoothing the fabric that had gotten her into so much trouble. Imagine living in a world where the colour of your clothing could literally decide your fate, where a splash of scarlet on your tunic could mean a fine, a public shaming, or worse. The judge delivers his verdict swiftly. The dress will be confiscated, the merchant fined, and the woman warned never to wear above her station again. She bows low, tears catching the torchlight as the crimson is ripped from her shoulders. The merchant glares at the ground, knowing the punishment will likely ruin his business. And you? You can't help but think how absurd it all seems. A world where the nobility guards colours like treasure, where dignity is woven not in deeds, but in cloth. The clerk flips to the next case, and suddenly the room bursts into laughter. Not kind laughter, but the cruel, mocking kind. A man is accused of carrying his goose to market under his arm, rather than on a leash, as local ordinance required. The poor fellow protests, saying the bird had no desire to be leashed, and he feared losing it in the bustle. Yet here he stands, scolded for failing to follow a law so peculiar it feels like satire. The goose itself sits in a basket at his feet, honking indignantly at the crowd, as if aware it has been dragged into the court's theatre. The judge raises an eyebrow, clearly irritated that his chamber has become a stage for laughter. He slams his staff, demanding silence, before reminding all present that laws are laws, however strange they may seem. The man is fined, his goose confiscated as evidence. The crowd disperses its giggles into murmurs, but you can feel it. Beneath the laughter lies fear. For if a goose could bring you here, what chance did any villager have of living without misstep? You lean back against the hard bench, spine aching, realizing this isn't just justice, it's spectacle. Each absurd law, each ridiculous accusation isn't merely about crime. It's about reminding every soul in the room that the crown, the church, and the Lord see everything. Bread, ale, colours, geese, it doesn't matter. They'll make laws to bind even the smallest corners of daily life, and they'll enforce them with zeal. Your eyes wander up to the rafters, where smoke from the torches curls like grey fingers. You imagine the whispers of generations past other villagers who once stood in this very spot for crimes just as strange, condemned for wearing the wrong shoes, baking the wrong loaf, or tending to their animals at the wrong hour. And in that moment, the absurdity transforms into something more unsettling. These weren't just laws to laugh at. These were chains disguised as order. The court doesn't pause long before the next name is called, echoing through the vaulted chamber like a church bell. A boy no older than 16 shuffles forward, his knees knocking together with every step. He wears patched trousers, a frayed tunic, and the terrified look of someone who doesn't belong here. The scribe unfurls the parchment and reads the charge with dramatic weight. Fishing in the Lord's pond without leave. The crowd gasps, as though the boy had tried to steal the crown jewels. In truth, he had only been caught with a single trout, barely large enough to feed his family. You can see the boy's hands trembling as he pulls the fish, now dried and shriveled, from his satchel. His mother sits at the back of the hall, eyes red from weeping, clutching a ragged shawl around her shoulders. She had likely sent him to the pond, desperate for food. The judge frowns, muttering about the sanctity of the Lord's waters. How even the smallest fish belong to noblemen by right. Imagine that standing trial because you dared to feed your starving siblings with what swam freely in a pond. You glance around at the peasants gathered in the room. Many of them likely fished in secret too, hearts pounding, always fearful of being caught. A single trout, a few eels, even a handful of minnows could mean the difference between life and hunger. And yet, here it was, branded a crime. The verdict comes swiftly. The boy is fined, though everyone knows his family has no coin to pay. Unable to settle the debt, he will be sentenced to labor, forced to work the fields of the manor until the Lord deems the punishment fulfilled. The boy's shoulders slump as he is led away. The trout dropped to the floor like discarded evidence. The murmurs of the crowd follow him, some sympathetic, others fearful, as though pity itself might be punished next. But before the chamber can settle, another man is hauled forward, his broad chest puffed up with outrage. He wears a farmer's cloak, rough wool patched in too many places to count, and his hair is wild with defiance. The scribe reads the charge, harboring bees without permission. Yes, bees. The man explodes in protest, insisting that the hives had been his family's for generations. Honey, beeswax, mead, it was his livelihood. But according to the law, all bees and their produce technically belonged to the Lord, since bees were considered part of the wild game. To keep them without paying a tax or securing the Lord's blessing was theft. Imagine that owning bees could land you in court. The absurdity burns in your chest. You half expect the judge to declare next that the wind and the rain also belong to the nobility. The crowd stirs restlessly. Some nod in agreement with the farmer, others duck their heads, unwilling to appear sympathetic to defiance. The judge listens, face hard as stone, then announces that the hives will be seized and the man fined heavily. His bees, his honey, his entire livelihood gone. The farmer spits on the ground in fury, earning him another slap from the bailiff's staff. The peasants shiver. Everyone knows that while the law may seem absurd, resistance only makes it harsher. And then, in a turn that almost feels like satire, the next case is read aloud. A miller, accused of charging unfairly high fees for grinding grain. You lean forward, curious surely this one is reasonable, but as the details spill out, it becomes clear that the unfair price was simply anything the Lord himself hadn't approved. The miller, in his attempt to cover the cost of maintaining his water wheel, had raised his price by a single copper coin. Now he stood trial for greed. The irony drips thick in the air. The Lord who takes his share of everything, branding a man greedy for daring to scrape together an extra coin. The miller's face reddens with frustration. He tries to explain the repairs, the labor, the countless hours spent bent over his grinding stones. But the judge waves him off. The verdict? He must return the extra coins, face public shame, and swear never to alter prices without approval again. The murmur of the peasants swells, frustration simmering beneath the surface. You can feel it, a collective ache, a suppressed anger at laws designed not to protect but to bind. And yet, no one dares speak. The punishments are too severe, the system too powerful. You glance up at the rafters again, half expecting the smoke from the torches to spell out a single warning: obey or suffer. And as the next case begins, your heart sinks. It's not about bread or ale, not about colours or geese. It's about something stranger still, something so outlandish that the chamber itself buzzes with anticipation. The scribe clears his throat, preparing to read aloud the charge that will plunge this courtroom deeper into absurdity. The hush falls again, heavy and expectant. The scribe licks his finger, flips the parchment, and announces the next charge with almost theatrical relish. A man accused of baking pies with meat on a Friday. Go why? The crowd erupts half in laughter, half in scandalized gasps. The man in question, a portly fellow with grease stains on his apron, looks utterly miserable. His round face shines with sweat as he clutches a small basket lined with cloth. Inside it lies the evidence. One humble pie, its crust cracked open just enough to reveal a sliver of venison. You can almost smell it, the rich, savory meat, spiced with herbs, wafting through the chamber. The scent drifts past you, and your stomach growls despite yourself. The irony gnaws at you. Here is a man facing judgment not for theft, not for violence, but for daring to bake meat on the wrong day of the week. In the eyes of the court, he hadn't just broken the law, he'd sinned. Fridays were for fish. Meat was forbidden, no matter how hungry you were or how much venison lingered in your pantry. The judge leans back, hands steepled, as the baker stammers about feeding his children, about the meat spoiling if he left it untouched. But the courtroom shakes its head in unison, like a flock of crows. It doesn't matter. The law is the law. The punishment? A fine, and worse. The pies are to be seized and destroyed. A gasp spreads at this cruelty. To destroy food in a land where hunger stalks every doorstep feels almost monstrous. Yet the bailiff carries the basket away, the smell fading as quickly as it came, leaving only the taste of absurdity behind. And before the room has even settled, another case is read aloud, this one stranger still. A shepherd stands trembling, wool clinging to his cloak like burrs. His charge? Failing to keep his sheep indoors during a lunar eclipse. The superstition runs deep here. The law claimed that sheep exposed to the strange light of an eclipse would sicken, their wool cursed, their milk soured, and so it became punishable by fine, or worse if any, were left grazing in the open fields when the moon darkened. The shepherd bows low, his voice breaking as he explains that he hadn't known an eclipse was coming. He was alone on the hills, tending to his flock, when the moon turned to shadow. The villagers, panicked, reported him immediately. The judge strokes his beard, pretending to ponder, though you can see the verdict in his eyes before the words even leave his lips. The shepherd is guilty. His fine will be paid in sheep. The bailiff steps forward, tugging one bleating animal away from the man's flock as his children cry in the gallery. You feel the absurdity sharpen into cruelty once again. The eclipse would pass, the sheep would live, and yet the man loses part of his livelihood to satisfy a law built on fear. But then the next case arrives, and it sends the entire hall into stunned silence. A woman is accused of hanging her laundry on a Sunday. Yes, laundry. She stands in the centre of the chamber, a basket of linen at her feet, her face pale as death. The scribe drones on, explaining how the law forbids unseemly labour on the Sabbath. Apparently, her clothesline, strung across her yard, had been spotted by the wrong neighbour. Her punishment? She faces not only a fine, but the public shame of having her linens paraded through the market square as evidence of her sin. You imagine its shirts and stockings fluttering like flags of disgrace, while villagers snicker and point. The cruelty of such pettiness lands heavy, and yet there's more. The next parchment reveals another law, one so bizarre you almost laugh out loud. A man is dragged in, accused of wearing shoes with too many points. Fashion, in these times, was carefully policed. The wealthy strutted in long, curling shoes so long they sometimes tied the tips to their knees. But peasants? They were forbidden from such indulgence. This man, a humble cobbler, had crafted himself a pair of shoes with tips just a little too extravagant. His feet, once merely clothed, had become his crime. The judge peers down, unimpressed, while the cobbler argues that they were practical, that the points helped him dig into muddy paths. But practicality doesn't matter. The shoes are cut from his feet right there in the courtroom, leather sliced and discarded, as the man winces in pain. His punishment: to walk barefoot for a week, shamed for daring to aspire above his station. The chamber falls into a kind of rhythm now, each case stranger than the last, each law more absurd than the one before. And as you watch, a thought creeps in. This isn't just a court of law, it's a theatre of control. Every charge, every punishment, isn't about justice. It's about reminding everyone in the room that no act, no matter how small, is beyond the eyes of the law. The scribe dips his quill again, parchment scratching as the next case is prepared. You feel the torches flicker, shadows stretching across the stone walls. The absurdity is no longer amusing, it's suffocating. And as the chamber falls silent once more, you can't help but wonder, what strange law will they enforce next? The scribe clears his throat, his quill scratching furiously as he unfurls the next parchment. The bailiff slams his staff, and another figure is shoved forward. This time it's an elderly man, his back bent, his beard wiry and white. He clutches a small cage in his arms, inside of which a thin, grey cat stares out with glowing eyes. The charge? Owning a cat suspected of witchcraft. The courtroom gasps. The old man shakes his head, protesting in a quavering voice that the cat is nothing more than a mouser, a companion that keeps his grain stores free from rats. But in these times, cats carried suspicion. A black cat crossing your path could brand you cursed, and in certain regions laws were enacted to restrict who could even keep one. The judge frowns gravely, as though weighing the fate not only of the man, but of the feline itself. The old man pleads without the cat. Vermin would devour his harvest. But superstition weighs heavier than logic here. The verdict falls like a hammer. The cat is confiscated and will be destroyed. The man fined for harbouring a familiar. The old man collapses to his knees, tears streaking his face as the bailiff wrenches the cage from his hands. The cat yowls, claws scraping against the bars, its cries echoing in the hall. The crowd shudders, some crossing themselves, others whispering curses. You feel a cold knot form in your chest. Imagine living in a world where your only crime was owning the wrong pet. Before the chamber can shake off the unease, another case is called. A young couple steps forward, hands bound together at the wrist with rope. Their charge? Kissing in public. A ripple of laughter breaks through the solemn air, though it quickly dies under the glare of the judge. The couple blush deeply, their heads bowed. The scribe explains, they had been caught in the village square, lips pressed together for all to see. To us it might seem harmless sweet, even. But here it was deemed lewd and unlawful. Affection was not for public display. Modesty was law. The punishment is swift. They are ordered to stand in the pillory side by side, forced to endure a day of jeers and rotten vegetables hurled by neighbours. You picture it vividly. The two, still tied at the wrist, leaning against the wooden stocks, red-faced with shame. The same villagers who likely smiled at their romance now scold them with cruel laughter. The law has turned love into crime. But just as the couple is led away, the next case takes absurdity to another level. A stout man with a barrel chest is hauled before the judge, grumbling under his breath. His crime? Excessive feasting. Yes, feasting. The scribe elaborates. The man had thrown a banquet with more meat, bread, and ale than was deemed appropriate for his social standing. The law forbade peasants from indulging too lavishly, lest they forget their place. The evidence? Half a roast goose, a cask of ale, and several wheels of cheese all paraded into the chamber by smug officials. The man protests, insisting it had been a wedding feast, a once-in-a-lifetime celebration. But the court is unmoved. Too much food in the hands of a commoner smacked of arrogance. The judge declares the feast unlawful, the food seized, and the host fined. The irony bites deep. The very meal meant to unite a community now becomes grounds for punishment. You almost laugh at the absurdity, but the look on the man's face, defiant, humiliated, betrayed, keeps your amusement bitter. And still, the cases continue. A young boy is dragged in, barely 10 years old, clutching a crude wooden whistle he'd carved himself. His crime? Disturbing the peace with unlawful music. The courtroom titters. The whistle had been heard in the market, shrill and off-key, drawing complaints from merchants. In this town, no one was permitted to play instruments without the Lord's explicit approval. The judge scolds the boy for mocking the harmony of the realm. The punishment: his whistle is broken before his eyes, snapped in two by the bailiff, and his family fined a small but painful sum. The boy weeps, staring at the splintered wood in his hands. And you, sitting there, feel a mix of rage and disbelief. Imagine outlawing music in a place already starved of joy. The chamber shifts again, the mood souring further as another parchment is drawn. A widow steps forward, her black veil draped low. Her crime: keeping her mourning garb longer than the law allows. In this land, mourning was carefully regulated. A woman could grieve a husband for 1 year no longer. After that, she was expected to cast aside her black, to return to bright colours, and if possible, to remarry. But this woman, heartbroken still, had worn her mourning cloak into a second year. The judge regards her coldly, reminding her that grief must not disrupt the orderly rhythm of the community. The law demanded she move on. Her cloak is stripped from her shoulders, her fine is set, and she is warned never to wear black again unless another close relative dies. The cruelty stuns you. Imagine legislating grief itself, punishing sorrow as though it were rebellion. By now, the air in the courtroom feels heavy, suffocating, thick with the scent of torches and sweat. You shift on the hard bench, your back aching, your thoughts swimming with disbelief. Cats, kisses, feasts, whistles, grief, nothing escapes the grasp of these absurd laws. And just as your mind begins to reel, the bailiff slams his staff once more. The next charge, he declares, concerns a man accused of sneezing in church. The room bursts into whispers, and you lean forward, half convinced you must have misheard. But no, the scribe reads it aloud, steady and solemn. A sneeze during Mass had disrupted the sanctity of the service. The man claims it was nothing more than dust, a tickle in his nose. Yet here he stands, charged as though he had committed sacrilege. The punishment? To kneel at the church steps for an entire day, sneezing or not, while townsfolk pass him by, shaking their heads at his irreverence. The absurdity piles higher and higher, until it almost tips into madness. You glance around at the faces in the courtroom. Some are amused, some afraid, some simply weary. And you realize, no matter how ridiculous the law, the punishment is always real. Lives ruined, dignity stripped, families broken all, because someone dared to wear a colour, play a tune, kiss a lover, or sneeze at the wrong moment. The torchlight flickers again, shadows, stretching across the walls like grasping fingers. The scribe dips his quill, readying the next parchment, and you brace yourself, because if tonight has shown you anything, it's that the laws will only grow stranger from here. The air in the courtroom has grown thick, part smoke, part sweat, part the suffocating weight of sheer absurdity. The scribe unrolls yet another parchment, his voice hoarse from reading out one bizarre charge after another. The bailiff slams his staff, and the next figure shuffles forward. This time, it's a merchant with ink-stained fingers, his satchel bulging with ledgers. The charge? Measuring goods with an unapproved unit. The room titters. Apparently, this man had been selling cloth in the marketplace, and instead of using the Lord's official yardstick, an awkward wooden rod kept under lock and key, he'd used his own. The difference? Barely a finger's length. But to the court, it was a serious crime, tampering with weights and measures. The merchant protests, insisting that his customers were satisfied, that no one had complained, but the judge is unmoved. Fair trade, he declares, cannot be trusted unless measured by the Lord's tools. The punishment? His yardstick is snapped in half before the entire chamber. and he must pay a fine to have the official one rented out to him for future business. You shake your head, realizing how clever the law truly is. It's less about accuracy and more about extracting coin at every opportunity. Next, a young girl is dragged forward, barely 12, her face pale with terror. In her hands, she clutches a bunch of wildflowers, stems dripping with dew. Her crime, plucking herbs from the wrong meadow, gasps ripple through the chamber. For in this land, even the meadows belong to someone. Some herbs were claimed by the church for medicines, others by the Lord for his kitchen. To pluck flowers without permission was theft. The girl sobs, insisting she'd only wanted to braid them into a crown for her little brother. The judge sneers, unmoved. The flowers are seized, tossed carelessly aside, and her family fined. Imagine that beauty itself outlawed, joy turned into crime. The next case seems no less absurd. A tanner, his clothes stained with the stink of hides, is accused of working too late at night. By law, certain trades were forbidden after sunset. The pounding of hammers, the scraping of hides, the clatter of looms, all were said to disturb the peace. The tanner explains he had no choice. Daylight hours had slipped away, and his orders were overdue. But the judge cuts him off. Laws are laws. The punishment? He must stand outside his workshop at dusk for 3 nights in a row, holding a lantern as a warning that he once broke the curfew. The crowd snickers, but you can see the man's humiliation. He will be branded by gossip long after the lanterns are extinguished. And then comes a case so peculiar, the courtroom almost doesn't know whether to laugh or cry. A baker's apprentice is brought forward, his hands still dusted with flour. His crime? Whistling in the bakery. The scribe explains that whistling was forbidden in bakeries by custom and law alike. Why? Because apprentices were suspected of whistling to signal one another when they'd stolen bits of bread. Whistling meant mischief, theft, conspiracy. The boy stammers that he'd only been humming a tune to pass the time, but the law cares little for intent. The punishment? A cuff to the head, a fine for his master, and a warning carved into the court records. From this day forward, his whistle is branded as crime. The room hasn't even caught its breath when the next parchment is raised high. A woman steps forward, her cheeks flushed red, her apron stained with berry juice. She is accused of dyeing cloth without license. In this town, the art of dyeing was tightly controlled, reserved for guilds and approved craftsmen. To dip a tunic into a pot of berries, as this woman had done for her daughter, was an act of defiance. She tries to explain her child's dress had been torn. She wanted to cover the stain. But to the judge, her dyeing is rebellion, an encroachment on guild privileges. The punishment? Her cloth is confiscated, her dye pots smashed, her hands stained purple, as she clasps them together in despair. You imagine her walking home, fingertips bright as jewels, marked by the very crime she committed. The cases pile higher and higher, absurdity layered over absurdity, until the court feels less like justice and more like theatre. Each punishment is a scene, each law a reminder. You begin to notice the rhythm. Seize their goods, fine their families, shame them before their neighbours. Over and over again. But the next case cuts through the murmurs with chilling strangeness. A man is brought forward, accused not of action, but of silence, failing to cheer the king's procession. The crowd leans in, buzzing. It seems the man had stood along the roadside as the king's carriage passed through town. While others shouted and waved, he remained quiet, his face blank. A soldier reported him for failing to show the proper joy. The man protests that he'd been ill, too weak to lift his voice. But the law demanded visible loyalty. The punishment? He must kneel at the crossroads on the king's next visit, a wreath of thorns around his neck, shouting praises until his voice breaks. The absurdity chills you. Imagine a world where silence itself is treason. The chamber feels colder now, the laughter thinner, the air heavy with unease. And yet the scribe dips his quill again, preparing for another charge. Each new parchment promises something stranger, something crueler, something more absurd than the last. You sit there, your cloak prickling against your skin, bracing yourself for whatever madness comes next. The hall feels like it will never empty. Each time one trembling soul is led away, another is shoved forward, the bailiff's staff clanking like the ticking of a clock. The scribe unrolls another parchment, and you brace yourself. This time it's a stout woman, her sleeves rolled up, her hair wrapped in a scarf. She looks more annoyed than afraid. The charge? Baking bread too early in the morning. The crowd murmurs, puzzled. The scribe explains. She had lit her oven before the church bell marked sunrise. Laws regulated not just the size of loaves, but the very hour they could be baked. The reason? To prevent bakers from undercutting one another at unfair hours. The woman insists she had a sick child and wanted the bread ready before tending to him. But excuses mean nothing here. Her punishment? She must bake bread for the Lord's household for a week, unpaid, rising at whatever hour they demand. The crowd titters nervously, but you see the steel in her eyes as she's led away. She'll endure the humiliation, but she won't forget it. Another man is dragged forward, taller, gaunt, his hands calloused from hard labour. His crime? Collecting firewood in the wrong forest. A hush spreads. Everyone knows this law. Forests, by decree, belong to the crown or the lord. A poor man couldn't even gather twigs without risking punishment. The evidence? A bundle of sticks, barely enough to stoke a single fire. The judge barely listens to his pleas. The verdict is swift. The wood is seized. The man is fined more than he can pay, and when he cannot, he is sentenced to a day in the stocks. You imagine him sitting there, freezing, while the fire he needed smoulders in someone else's hearth. And then comes a case that makes the entire chamber stir with disbelief. A young woman is accused of singing while spinning. The scribe drones on. It was considered improper for spinners to sing, as songs might distract from their work or signal laziness. The woman, cheeks flushed, admits she sang softly to pass the hours. A lullaby, nothing more. The judge scolds her harshly, declaring that singing while spinning could tempt the devil into the thread. The punishment? She must spin wool in silence under supervision for 3 days. Every sound she makes recorded by the guild. The absurdity makes you laugh under your breath, but you quickly clamp your lips. In this court, laughter itself could be dangerous. The next case is even stranger. A man is accused of wearing his hat in the presence of the Lord's horse. Cry, yes, the horse. The scribe explains with great seriousness. The animal was startled when the man bowed, with his hat still on his head. Local superstition held that hats in the presence of noble beasts brought bad luck. The horse had reared, nearly unseating its rider, and the man now stood charged. His defence is simple: he'd forgotten, too tired after a day in the fields. But the law is merciless. His punishment, to walk bareheaded in the marketplace for a month, hatless, no matter the sun or rain. You shake your head. A man reduced to penance before a horse, it's theatre, nothing more. But the absurdity doesn't stop. Another parchment is raised, and the charge rings out. Using butter on non-fasting days in the wrong season. The accused, a pale, thin farmer, explains he'd churned butter for his family, despite a local ordinance forbidding dairy during Lent, unless a tax was paid. The fine for such indulgence was heavy, and the church guards the rule fiercely. The punishment? His butter is seized, melted into a communal pot, and his family fined enough to keep them hungry for weeks. You imagine the taste of that butter, so ordinary to us, turned into contraband by decree. The next figure to appear is a fisherman, smelling of salt and river water. His charge? Selling fish too small. At first, it sounds reasonable: protect the stocks. But as the scribe drones on, you realize the law isn't about conservation at all. It's about tax. Smaller fish, harder to weigh, often slipped through the Lord's levies. And so, Anyone selling them was guilty. The fisherman protests, saying it was all he had caught that day. The judge sneers. His punishment: the fish are dumped in the mud outside, wasted, while he is fined for daring to trade honestly. The chamber buzzes now, not with laughter, but with a kind of anxious fatigue. Each case bleeds into the next. Bread, wood, song, hats, butter, fish, every part of life twisted into law, every act measured against some decree. And then, just as the air grows heavy, the next charge lightens it with ridiculous absurdity. A man is accused of letting his donkey bray during curfew. The courtroom explodes with laughter before the bailiff slams his staff for silence. Apparently, the donkey had brayed loudly after the evening bell, waking the neighbours. The law was clear: no loud noises after curfew. The donkey's bray counted. The man argues that he can't control his animal's voice, but the judge won't hear it. The punishment? The donkey is muzzled for a week, and the owner fined for disturbing the peace. You picture the poor beast, nose-bound, unable to bray, while the villagers stifle giggles every time they see it. As the laughter fades, you realize something chilling beneath the humor. These laws, ridiculous as they are tools of control. They stretch into every corner of life: food, work, song, even animals. Nothing escapes, nothing is free. The torches flicker, shadows creeping up the walls, as the next parchment is prepared. And you sit there, heart heavy, wondering if a sneeze, a song, or a donkey's bray can be crimes, what absurdity will this court demand judgment for next? The air grows close inside the courtroom, thick with torch smoke and the sour scent of woolen cloaks pressed together too long. The bailiff slams his staff again, and another trembling villager is hauled before the judge. This time, it's a wiry old man, with crooked shoulders and bright, defiant eyes. His crime? Watering his cow at the wrong river. The scribe explains, by decree certain rivers were reserved for noble herds. Peasants could water their beasts only at lesser streams, lest the great cattle of lords be polluted by peasant stock. The man spits on the floor, saying it was nearer and his cow was thirsty. But the judge only scowls. His punishment? He must carry buckets of water from the reserved river to the lord's stable for 3 days, serving the very beasts his cow was forbidden to join. You imagine him staggering under the weight, punished not for theft, but for quenching thirst. Next, a timid young boy is pushed forward, holding a wooden flute carved crudely by his own hand. The charge? Playing music in the wrong season. The chamber stirs. Everyone knows that music was once bound to festivals, feast days, or sanctioned gatherings. To play outside those times was suspicious. What tune might he be summoning? What spirit called by his notes? The boy swears he played only to chase away boredom, to make his chores lighter. But the law sees danger in his melody. His punishment? The flute is snapped in half, and he must sit in silence through the next 3 festivals as a sign of penance. You can almost hear the hollow crack of the wood as his small joy is taken away. Another case follows swiftly, absurd in its precision. A miller is accused of spinning his wheel too fast. The scribe explains that mills were regulated, how much grain could be ground, how fast and when. A wheel that spun too swiftly was said to cheat the toll, grinding more flour than the lord's tax accounted for. The miller protests that the river's current had been strong, nothing more. The judge sneers. His punishment? His mill wheel is locked in place for a week, silenced. Imagine it. A mill by the river, wheel stilled, the villagers' sacks piling up uselessly while the water rushes past. Wasted, and then a case so strange, you almost choke holding back laughter. A woman is accused of wearing shoes too fine for her station. The charge is read aloud with solemn gravity. By law, peasants could not wear certain colours, fabrics, or designs reserved for nobles. The woman had stitched her own shoes, sturdy but decorated with bright leather patterns. The court gasps at her audacity. She protests that they were her own work, her own hands. But the punishment is swift. The shoes are confiscated, her feet left bare as she walks home through mud and stone. You wince, imagining each step the lesson carved into her soles. Next comes a merchant, weary and indignant, accused of selling candles of the wrong length. The law dictated that candles must be a certain size, not too short, not too long, for all official trade. Why? Because taxes and prices depended on those measures. The man swears his candles burned true, but the court insists the standard was not met. His punishment? His candles are broken in two, and he has fined enough coin to leave his purse nearly empty. The room flickers with torchlight, and you imagine a household left in darkness because the law preferred profit over flame. But the absurdity grows darker. Another man is dragged forward, accused of harboring a cat without permission. The chamber murmurs uneasily. Cats were often tied to superstition, suspected of witchcraft, or claimed by lords for keeping granaries free of rats. This man had taken in a stray, feeding it scraps. The scribe calls it unlawful possession of a beast. His defense is simple. It followed him home, and he pitied it. The judge doesn't care. The punishment? The cat is seized by the lord's men, and the man fined for endangering grain stores. You picture him walking home alone, a bowl of milk untouched, the empty silence where purring once was. As if this weren't enough, the next charge borders on the ridiculous. A farmer is accused of laughing in church. The chamber stiffens. The scribe explains. During Mass, the man had stifled a laugh when his neighbor sneezed loudly. The priest called it disrespect, a crime against the sanctity of the service. The man pleads, insisting he meant no harm, but laughter in sacred space is forbidden. His punishment? He must kneel in the nave for 3 Sundays, silent, while others pass by whispering their prayers. You feel your throat tighten laughter itself, stolen from him, branded as sin. And then comes a charge so peculiar, it feels like satire. A villager is accused of blocking the sun with his ladder. The scribe reads solemnly. While painting his cottage roof, the man's ladder had cast a shadow across a noble woman's garden. She claimed her herbs were deprived of sunlight. The court agrees. His punishment? He must publicly apologize to the herbs and pay damages to the noblewoman for lost growth. Imagine the scene. A grown man bowing to plants, muttering apologies while the crowd struggles not to collapse in laughter. The cases tumble one after another like stones rolling downhill. You sit, dazed, trying to track them all. Cows at rivers, music out of season, mill wheels too fast, shoes too fine, candles too short, cats without leave. Laughter in churches, shadows treated as crimes. And yet, beneath the laughter, the lesson sinks deeper. No action is too small to escape the reach of law. Each absurdity is a net, cast wider and wider, until even shadows belong to someone else. The bailiff slams his staff again, and the torches sputter, spitting sparks into the smoke-thick air. Another parchment is lifted high, and you wonder what could possibly be next, when already the absurd has swallowed everything whole. The torches hiss as resin drips down their iron sconces, filling the air with a sharp tang of smoke. The crowd shifts restlessly on wooden benches, some hiding grins behind their hands, others muttering prayers beneath their breath. The judge adjusts his robe, the scribe clears his throat, and once more the parade of absurdity begins. A farmer, broad-shouldered and sunburnt, is pushed forward. His crime? Letting his pig wander without a nose ring. The scribe explains, by decree, pigs must wear rings through their noses to prevent rooting up the Lord's fields. This man's pig had slipped its ring and happily dug at the roadside dirt. The farmer shrugs helplessly. What pig can be fully controlled? The punishment? The man is ordered to crawl on all fours before the court, snuffling like a pig, while the bailiff scolds him for his beast's freedom. The chamber bursts with laughter. though you feel the heat of his humiliation as if it were your own. Before the laughter fades, another case is called. A widow is accused of hanging her laundry on the wrong day. The law dictates that certain days, especially feast days, are reserved for worship and dignity, not drying linens in plain sight. Her sheets had fluttered in the breeze while bells tolled for mass. The punishment? Her clothesline is cut down, and she is fined a small sum. Though she protests, she has little enough to live on. You imagine her trudging home with wet linens in her arms, muttering curses, dignity stripped along with her laundry. Next, a nervous man with soot-stained hands is led in. His charge? Burning coal without license. The scribe drones. In this town, coal was taxed heavily, and burning it without paying meant cheating the Lord's purse. The man insists it was only a small fire to warm his sick wife. The judge waves him silent. His punishment? A bucket of his own ashes is dumped over his head in public, so all know he dared to burn without leave. You picture him coughing, eyes stinging, dignity buried beneath grey dust. And then comes a case so strange you nearly laugh aloud. A shepherd is accused of allowing his sheep to bleat during the night watch. The charge reads with solemnity. The sheep's noise had disturbed the town guard. The shepherd protests it is in the nature of sheep to bleat. The judge replies coldly, it is in the nature of laws to command. His punishment? He must spend 3 nights outside the city gate, with his flock muzzled. The absurdity of silence imposed on beasts of pasture. Imagine it, dozens of sheep, silent as ghosts, their jaws bound by cords. The next charge is even more ridiculous. A merchant's apprentice is accused of dropping a crust of bread on the floor. The law held bread as sacred. Waste was an insult to God. The boy had fumbled, dropping a crust in the mud. The punishment? He must lick the dirt from the bread before the court to show his contrition. The crowd winces, some gagging, others chuckling. You can almost taste the grit between your own teeth, the shame sharper than hunger. Another villager shuffles forward, charged with wearing colours above his station. The law of sumptuary dress is well known. Peasants may not wear crimson, purple, or deep blue hues reserved for nobility. Yet here he stands, cloak trimmed in red thread. His defence? It was dyed with berries, nothing more. The judge sneers, declaring him a pretender. His punishment? The cloak is stripped from his shoulders and burned before his eyes. The flames dance higher than his pride, leaving him bare and shivering in the cold. But the absurdity doesn't pause. A thin, frightened woman is accused of fetching water after curfew. The charge is plain. Bells had tolled, and no soul was to wander the streets. Yet her child had been thirsty, and she crept to the well. The bailiff caught her with bucket in hand. Her punishment? She must haul water for the guardhouse for a week, each night at dusk, under the watchful eye of the very men who caught her. You see her back bent, her dignity wrung from her with every bucket. Then comes a case almost comical, almost tragic. A man is accused of laughing too loudly at a funeral. The scribe explains, during a burial the man had burst into laughter when a coffin-bearer slipped. The priest called it blasphemy. The man insists he couldn't help it. It was nervous laughter, nothing more. The punishment? He must attend the next funeral bound in silence, gagged with a cloth so no sound escapes him. You picture the mourners whispering, glancing sideways at the man who sits gagged, forced into solemnity by decree. And still it goes on. A young woman is accused of singing songs not approved by the church. She had hummed a ballad of love while weaving, but the melody was of old pagan origin. The judge frowns darkly, declaring such songs dangerous. Her punishment? She must copy church hymns by hand until her fingers blister, filling page after page until her voice belongs only to approved melodies. Another case follows, stranger yet. A man is accused of blocking the path of geese reserved for the Lord's table. The scribe explains, the geese had been driven through the village, destined for the castle kitchens. This man, carrying his cart, delayed them in the street. His punishment? He must walk behind the geese the next time they are driven, broom in hand, sweeping their droppings from the cobblestones as a warning not to hinder noble property again. The absurdity grows heavier with each case, yet the court does not falter. It is as if the laws themselves multiply in the torchlight, each one more invasive than the last. The people shift, weary, resigned. Some shake their heads, others mutter prayers. And you sit there, cloak pulled tight, a chill creeping up your spine. Because now you realize the truth. This is not justice, it is theatre. A stage where dignity is stripped, laughter is punished, songs silenced, bread dirtied, animals bound, colours forbidden. Every law is absurd, but every punishment is real. The bailiff slams his staff again, and another parchment is raised. The absurd show is far from over. The scribe's quill scratches, the parchment unrolls, and you feel the crowd lean forward again. The court has become a kind of grotesque performance, each case stranger than the last, yet delivered with deadly seriousness. The air stinks of wax, sweat, and nervous laughter. First to step forward is a farmer's wife, carrying a basket of eggs. Her crime? Selling eggs too fresh. The chamber chuckles nervously, but the scribe explains. Only the guild had the right to sell eggs deemed fit for market, aged long enough to meet their standard. Fresh eggs, they claimed, were unfair competition. The woman pleads her hens laid too many, her family needed coin. But the judge declares her guilty. Her punishment? Her eggs are smashed against the floor, yolk and shell spattering her skirts, while the bailiff warns her never to compete with the guild again. You imagine her walking home, hands sticky, dignity broken along with her eggs. Next, a bent old man is accused of sweeping dust into the street. The law demanded that each household keep its filth contained, for dust in the street was said to offend the Lord's eyes during processions. The man, too weak to sweep carefully, had let the breeze carry dirt beyond his doorway. The punishment? He is ordered to lick his broom clean before the court, to show he will keep dust in its place. You see his lips tighten, his eyes burning with shame as laughter ripples through the chamber. A shepherd is brought in next, his hair wild, his clothes matted with wool. His crime? Counting his sheep aloud. The scribe drones. Villagers had complained that his nightly counting disturbed their rest. The law, ever eager to intervene, declared it a public nuisance. His punishment? He must count silently for a week, yet under guard. So every night the bailiff stands watching to ensure his lips move, but no sound emerges. Imagine it, a man counting sheep without words, while others sleep undisturbed, as if silence could change the nature of shepherding. The next case makes the court roar with laughter. A blacksmith is accused of hammering out of rhythm with the church bell. The charge. His anvil's beat had clashed with the tolling of vespers. The priest called it sacrilege. The blacksmith swears he hadn't noticed, but the judge thunders that holy rhythm must never be disturbed. His punishment? For 3 days, he must hammer only when the church bell strikes, creating a grotesque music of clang and chime. You can almost hear it, metal on metal, bell on bell, a forced duet between labour and liturgy. But the laughter fades quickly when a gaunt, pale woman is dragged forward. Her crime? Owning more than 3 candles. The law limits peasants to a small number of candles, lest they pretend to luxury or waste wax needed for the church. She had 4, no more. Yet the punishment is severe. The extra candle is melted before her eyes, and she is fined a week's wages. You imagine her cottage plunged into darkness, a family huddled in shadow because light itself is rationed by decree. Another man steps forward, his beard stiff with frost. His crime? Whistling on a winter night. The scribe intones gravely. Superstition held that whistling in winter summoned spirits of the cold, bringing storms upon the town. The man admits he'd only whistled to warm his lips. But superstition has weight in this court. His punishment? He must sit outside at dusk, lips clamped shut with a wooden peg, while the villagers file past, certain the storm has been averted by his silence. The next case leaves you blinking in disbelief. A tanner is accused of spilling water where nobles might step. He had poured out the dregs of his vat, and a noblewoman's servant complained her mistress's slippers might be soiled. His punishment? He must lie flat at the castle gate during the next procession, his cloak spread beneath the noblewoman's feet, so she treads not on dirt, but on his garment. You see his face harden, dignity ground into the dust as surely as his cloak will be. Then comes a charge so surreal, the crowd gasps. A boy is accused of mimicking the croak of a frog. The priest claimed he had mocked the sacred chants by imitating beasts. The boy protests he was only playing by the pond. The judge glares, calling it blasphemy. His punishment? He must kneel in church, wearing a frog mask, silent, while the congregation prays around him. You can almost see it, a child, face hidden by crude green leather, treated as mockery incarnate. The next case strikes even harder. A weary midwife is accused of touching the church bell rope without leave. She had rung the bell in desperation when her patient was near death, hoping for prayers. But only appointed hands may touch the rope. The punishment? She must scrub the bell tower steps with her bare hands, each stone cutting her palms, until she has cleansed her trespass. You imagine her raw fingers, aching, punished not for sin, but for mercy. Finally, a travelling minstrel is dragged forward, his lute slung broken at his side. His crime, telling stories without license. The guilds claimed monopoly over tales as much as trades. He had sung ballads in the marketplace without paying dues. The judge sneers, declaring that words themselves must be bought and sold. His punishment? His lute strings are cut, one by one, and he is banished from the town for a season. You hear the silence that follows, the void left when stories are outlawed. The bailiff slams his staff. The torches crackle. The parchment rolls up. And you sit there, heart heavy, realizing the theatre will never end. Every candle, every sound, every colour, every word claimed by law, rationed by decree. And still the scribe reaches for another scroll. The benches creak as villagers lean closer, half dreading, half eager for what absurdity comes next. The torches sputter, casting quivering shadows on the stone walls, and the bailiff slams his staff once more. The next charge is read aloud, and the chamber groans. A gaunt baker's apprentice, his tunic stiff with flour, is accused of slicing bread unevenly. The guild demands precision. Every loaf must be cut into equal portions. No more, no less. This boy had sliced one too thick, one too thin. The judge sneers, saying imbalance breeds disorder. His punishment? He must eat the thin slice before the court, leaving the thick one untouched, as a lesson in greed and fairness. The crowd chuckles, though you sense his shame rising like yeast. Next comes a stooped old woman, clutching herbs in her apron. Her crime? Drying nettles without a license. By decree, only guild healers could prepare herbs for medicine. She insists the nettles were for soup, nothing more. The court ignores her. Her punishment? The nettles are burned before her, smoke curling into her face, and she must pay coin she scarcely owns. You imagine her cottage empty of flavour, her cauldron simmering with nothing but water and salt. The next man, tall and weary, carries a basket of apples. His charge? Selling fruit too small. The guild requires apples of proper size for trade. Small ones, they say, cheat the measure. His punishment? The apples are hurled into the mud outside, wasted, while he is fined for daring to sell nature's blemishes. The crowd murmurs, uneasy, as the smell of crushed fruit drifts in. Then comes a case so absurd, it nearly breaks the court's stern mask. A woman is accused of laughing while churning butter. The priest declared her mirth unholy, claiming butter made in laughter curdled the soul. She insists joy lightened her work. The judge frowns. Her punishment is to churn in silence under watch, her lips pressed shut, her joy stifled like cream turned stiff. You feel your own chest tighten, as if laughter itself has been outlawed, but the absurdity does not pause. A fisherman is dragged in, dripping river water, charged with catching fish on a saint's feast day. Fishing, like all labor, was forbidden on holy days. The man argues he needed food for his children, nothing more. But the punishment is severe. His nets are cut to ribbons, and he must kneel in church holding a broken oar, a spectacle of penance. You can almost hear the whisper of hunger in his home that night. The next case makes the chamber buzz with disbelief. A girl is accused of braiding her hair in imitation of a noble. Her plait resembled the style of a lady's maid. This, the law decrees, is presumption. Her punishment? Her braids are cut off before the court. Her hair hacked short and uneven, so all see her shame. The scissors crunch in your mind's ear. Dignity severed with every strand. Another man shuffles forward, carrying a clay jug. His crime? Pouring ale after sunset. By decree, ale may not be sold once the bells have tolled. The man claims a neighbor begged for drink to soothe his cough. The judge is unmoved. His punishment? He must serve watered ale to the guardhouse for a week, mocked each time for his weak brew. The crowd snickers, though you sense the bitterness beneath. The next charge draws uneasy silence. A woman is accused of feeding stray dogs. The scribe explains, dogs belong to no one, yet the Lord claimed rights over them. Feeding them was said to interfere with the natural order. Her punishment? The dogs are driven off, chased with sticks, and she must fast a day in penance for her mercy. You feel your chest twist at the cruelty kindness itself condemned, but the absurdity grows stranger still. A farmer is accused of blocking the wind with his barn. A noble claimed the building diverted breezes from his fields. The court listens gravely. The punishment? The farmer must dismantle part of his roof for a season, so the wind may pass freely. You picture the rain soaking through, family shivering under a leaking ceiling, all in the name of invisible air. And then, with solemn gravity, another man is accused of smiling at the gallows. The scribe explains, during an execution, he had smiled nervously, a twitch mistaken for mockery. The judge declares his grin an insult to justice. His punishment? He must stand at the gallows during the next hanging, lips sewn with coarse thread, so no smile may betray him again. The image chills you fear turned into silence, expression itself outlawed. The parchment rolls on, the cases tumble forth, bread uneven, nettles dried, apples small, butter laughed over, fish on holy days, braids too fine, ale poured late, dogs fed, wind stolen, smiles misread. Each absurdity heavier than the last, yet all treated with the weight of sacred law. And as the staff slams again, you realize something. The absurd is no accident, it is power. A net cast so wide that no soul escapes, no act too small to be claimed, no smile or sigh free from judgment. The next scroll is lifted, ink glistening, and the theatre of absurdity marches on. The torches hiss, the parchment crackles, and the crowd shifts uneasily. The bailiff's staff pounds the flagstones, and another villager is dragged before the bench. His crime? Sweeping the street at the wrong hour. Lem, the decree is clear. Streets may only be swept at dawn, never at dusk, lest the dust offend noble noses returning from hunts. This man had swept after supper. His punishment? He must sweep the entire marketplace blindfolded at sunrise, stumbling into stalls as children jeer. You imagine bristles scratching cobblestones while laughter scrapes deeper still. The next offender is a thin seamstress, hands raw from stitches. Her charge? Sewing cloth on Sunday. Her neighbours had spied candlelight under her door, thread flashing in her lap. The law forbade labor on the Sabbath, no matter how small. She pleads. Her family needed the work. Coin was scarce. The judge dismisses her. Her punishment? She must wear the unfinished garment inside out for 3 market days, a walking sign of shame. The crowd murmurs her only cloak, twisted into ridicule. Then comes a shepherd, his cloak reeking of lanolin, leading a trembling lamb. His crime? Allowing sheep to graze too close to the chapel. Sacred grass, the priest declares, must remain untouched. The lamb's mouth had dared taste holiness. The punishment? The animal is confiscated and given to God's service, which in practice means roasted for the clergy's supper. The shepherd staggers, grief carved into his weathered face. Another parchment is read. A potter is accused of making jugs that whistle in the wind. His simple clay vessels, shaped with care, produced a faint hum when breezes passed their mouths. The court calls it an omen, a devil's song. His punishment? Every jug is smashed before the crowd, shards glinting like teeth, and he must carry the fragments to the river and cast them away. You picture him walking home with empty hands, silence heavier than clay. The next case rattles the chamber with murmurs. A young mother is charged with rocking her baby too vigorously. Her neighbor swore she shook the cradle in a way that disturbed the peace. The judge, eager to prove vigilance, agrees. Her punishment? She must cradle a sack of stones before the court for an hour, arms trembling, until she learns gentleness. The baby wails in her husband's arms, the only sound not silenced by fear. The absurd parade marches on. A blacksmith is brought forward, brawny and soot-stained. His crime? Shoeing a horse on the wrong day of the moon. The decree insists certain tasks must follow the lunar cycle. His punishment? He must stand barefoot on the anvil while reciting prayers. Mocked for his ignorance of celestial law, you hear the hiss of cooling metal beneath his feet, though no iron touches him. The next charge seems laughable, yet the courtroom treats it gravely. A boy is accused of skipping stones across the Lord's pond. Each ripple was declared an insult, disturbing the water's reflection of heaven. His punishment? He must gather the stones back, one by one, until the pond's surface lies smooth. The crowd chuckles, but the boy's small frame shakes under the weight of endless pebbles. Another case follows swiftly. A vintner, his lips stained with wine, is accused of pouring from the wrong hand. By guild tradition, wine must be poured with the right hand, never the left. He had slipped in habit. The punishment? He must pour with both hands, tied behind his back for a feast, wine spilling freely, laughter soaking his humiliation. The chamber grows heavier, absurdity piling like stones on weary backs. But then comes a charge that makes the room hush. A pilgrim is accused of praying too loudly. His voice had risen above the priest's during Vespers. The judge declares it arrogance, a challenge to holy order. His punishment? He must wear a gag in church for 3 Sundays, kneeling silently while others chant. You imagine prayers trapped in his chest, unspoken words bruising his ribs. And just when you think the well of nonsense must run dry, another parchment unfurls. A miller is accused of spinning his wheel too fast. Neighbours claimed the rushing water disturbed the river spirits. The punishment? He must slow his mill for a season, grinding half as much grain, his family hungry, his customers furious. The absurdity strikes like a hammer. Progress itself outlawed. The courtroom hums with unease. You look around at the faces tired, pale, worn by fear. Each villager sees themselves reflected in these punishments. A broom swept too late, a stitch sewn too long, a jug shaped too round. No action is safe, no life untouched, and yet the scribe dips his quill again. Another name, another crime, another chance to tighten the net. You exhale slowly, realizing this theatre of absurdity will not end. It grows, like ivy creeping stone, until it strangles the wall entirely. The chamber has grown restless, torches burning low, shadows stretching across the stone floor like blackened fingers. Yet the bailiff slams his staff once more, and silence coils around the room. Another parchment is unfurled, its ink still wet, as if the law itself is being written faster than life can be lived. The first offender, a farmer with dirt still under his nails, accused of singing to his oxen. The law decrees that beasts of burden must work in silence, lest songs weaken their spirit. The farmer insists the tunes calmed them, made ploughing easier. The judge scoffs. His punishment? He must plough the field while gagged, under watch, his oxen lowing mournfully at the silence. You can almost hear the echo of a song swallowed by the earth. The next case, a washerwoman, sleeves dripping, is charged with hanging laundry too high. Her line, strung between two cottages, brushed against a noble's passing banner. The insult was deemed deliberate. Her punishment? Every garment is seized, and she must wash the Lord's linens for a month without pay. You picture her children wearing rags, their laughter muffled under the stink of damp cloth. Then comes a cobbler, clutching a pair of boots. His crime? Making shoes too comfortable. The guild insists proper shoes must be stiff, proving the wearer's endurance. These boots, supple and soft, were declared subversive. His punishment? He must wear his own creation filled with pebbles for 7 days, limping through the streets as neighbours laugh. Comfort itself branded as rebellion. Another parchment. A woodcutter, shoulders broad, is accused of stacking logs in the shape of a cross. It was mere chance, he insists, but the priest sees heresy. His punishment? He must scatter the logs across the yard, then kneel while others restack them in proper order. Every thud of wood is a sermon against his careless symmetry. The absurdity sharpens. A brewer is accused of froth too thick. His ale, praised for its foam, is condemned as deceitful measure. The punishment? He must serve his brew skimmed flat, forced to watch customers grimace at the lifeless drink. Innovation drained into punishment, taste outlawed by decree. The next figure trembles, a boy clutching a wooden flute. His charge? Playing music in the wrong key. At a feast, his notes soured, and the noble deemed it insult. His punishment? His flute is broken in two, and he must hum the same song day after day until his voice cracks. You imagine him lying awake, humming through tears, dreaming of sound that no law can silence. Then comes a widow, shawl drawn tight. Her crime? Owning more than one cat. The law fears witches, and multiple cats reek of sorcery. She swears they kept mice from her grain. Her punishment? All but one cat are drowned in a barrel before her eyes. Her sobs echo through the chamber, mingling with faint mewls, silenced by water. Another parchment. A carpenter is charged with building a stool too tall. The decree insists only nobles may sit higher than a man's knee. His stool reached mid-thigh. His punishment? The stool is sawed down before the court, its splinters scattered, and he is forced to sit on the ground during meals for a year. Height itself turned criminal, and still the charges pour in. A midwife is accused of lighting too many candles during a birth. The priest claims it mocks the holy flame. She argues the room was dark, the mother in pain. The punishment? She must deliver her next patient by moonlight only, fumbling in shadow while law watches coldly. Life itself weighed against ritual. The absurdities pile higher, each stranger, each crueler. Singing to oxen, laundry too high, soft shoes, wooden crosses, frothy beer, false notes, too many cats, stools too tall, candles too bright. And then, with grim weight, another man is accused of walking backwards through town. He claims he was pulling a cart, guiding it in reverse. The judge declares it suspicious, a mockery of order. His punishment? He must crawl forward on hands and knees from one end of the square to the other, scraping flesh raw, while guards laugh. The parchment curls shut, the scribe's fingers stained black. You feel your own breath heavy in your chest, as if you too might be called forward at any moment. accused of smiling wrong, stepping wrong, living wrong. The law, absurd and unyielding, stretches claws into every corner of life, daring you to slip, daring you to breathe. And the court is not finished. The chamber reeks of smoke and sweat, the hour late, yet the bailiff's staff cracks down again. The villagers lean forward, eyes wide, both horrified and eager for the next taste of madness. Another parchment unfurls, ink glistening like a wound. The first case staggers the crowd. A farmer, cheeks still ruddy from the field, is accused of milking his cow too early in the morning. The decree states cows must not be milked before the church bell rings, lest the milk belong to the night spirits. The man protests. The cow was full, her udders tight. The court sneers. His punishment? The milk is poured out onto the dirt, wasted, while he must kneel in the barn 3 mornings in a row, praying to saints as the cow groans in discomfort. You picture her lowing, echoing through dawn. Mercy outlawed by law. Next comes a young apprentice mason, his tunic smeared with mortar. His crime? Carving a stone too beautifully. Quote, "The law reserves ornate work for church commissions only." His punishment? The stone is smashed with hammers, and he is ordered to chip rough edges for a month, beauty stripped from his hands, left only with rubble. The next offender? A merchant with ink on his fingers, clutching scrolls of accounts. He is accused of writing too small. The judge explains, "Tiny script cheats parchment, lowering cost." His punishment? He must rewrite every ledger in exaggerated letters, wasting paper, wasting coin, proving his loyalty through inefficiency. You imagine cramped fingers, night after night, forced to stretch words like bodies on the rack. Then comes a widow, grey-haired and frail, leaning on a stick. Her charge? Owning a mirror. The decree insists mirrors breed vanity, a sin unfit for common folk. Her punishment? The glass is shattered at her feet, shards glittering like cold stars, and she must recite prayers of humility for 7 days. The reflection of her own face outlawed as heresy. Another parchment curls open. A minstrel is dragged in, lute slung across his back. His crime? Playing a song not on the approved list. The nobles maintain control over music, only certain hymns, ballads, and marches permitted. He dared improvise a tune. His punishment? 2 strings are cut from his lute, leaving it crippled, while he is forced to strum hollow chords for entertainment. You can almost hear the limp, broken music. The next charge strikes even stranger. A beekeeper, his hands sticky with honey, is accused of allowing bees to swarm without license. The court claims swarming bees threaten order. His punishment? His hive is burned, wax and honey dripping into flame, while he stands helpless, smoke in his eyes. Sweetness turned to ash by decree. The absurdity marches on. A young girl, barefoot and timid, is accused of skipping stones in churchyard puddles. Each splash, the priest declares, disturbed the spirits of the dead. Her punishment? She must dry the puddles with rags, wringing water into buckets until her hands crack. Imagine a child, tasked with mopping the sky itself. Another case. A miller with flour in his beard is accused of weighing bread with his hand. He had placed loaves in his palm to judge their heft. The guild declares it fraud. Only scales may weigh bread. His punishment? He must carry stones equal to his body weight for a week, stumbling through the streets like a beast of burden. Then comes a boy with a wooden hoop. His crime? Rolling it too loudly. The decree claims games must not disturb noble ears. His punishment? The hoop is broken, and he must carry the fragments tied to his belt. A dangling rattle of shame with every step. And the cases spiral further. A shepherd is accused of counting sheep aloud at night, the sound carried to the manor, keeping the Lord awake. His punishment? He must count silently for a week, holding pebbles instead of numbers. Lips pressed shut while sheep wander free. The next charge brings bitter laughter. A brewer's wife is accused of smiling at strangers while serving ale. The judge declares it enticement, a form of unlawful trade. Her punishment? She must serve in silence, face veiled, her smile hidden as though it were contraband. You feel the weight of joy stifled once again. Another parchment. A gravedigger, spade over his shoulder, is accused of digging too deep. He insists he followed orders, but the priest claims the grave trespassed into sacred soil. His punishment? He must lie in the grave himself for an hour, dirt shoveled over him until only his face shows. As villagers peer down at his living burial, the absurdities continue. A butcher is accused of sharpening his knife on Sunday. The punishment? His blade is confiscated, and he must cut meat with a dull edge for a week, hacking clumsily while customers sneer. You imagine sinew tearing ragged under blunt steel, hunger stretched by inefficiency. Then comes a charge so strange it borders on dream. A boy is accused of running faster than the Lord's horse. He had raced alongside, bare feet slapping dirt, and for a moment he outpaced the steed. The Lord saw it as insult. His punishment? He must run backward through the town square, chased by dogs, mocked for daring to be swift. The parchment rolls again, and the list stretches longer still. You realize the court is endless. Every gesture, every habit, every joy can be twisted into a crime. To live is to break law. To breathe is to risk punishment. The villagers huddle, shoulders bent. You feel it too, the sense that this court is not a place, but a trap, a stage where absurdity performs, night after night, until the audience itself is bound in its scripts. And the staff slams again, another name, another crime, another absurdity waits. The chamber is weary, yet the bailiff's staff crashes once more, and silence falls like a cloak. The scribe drags his quill, opening yet another parchment, his eyes dull from the endless stream of accusations. The villagers sit rigid, as though a whisper might draw their own names into ink. A farmer shuffles forward, his boots caked with soil. His crime? Milking a goat while it faced the wrong direction. By decree, goats must face east at dawn, toward the rising sun, to honor creation. He had milked westward, absent-minded, while speaking with his wife. The punishment is sharp and cruel in its pettiness. He must turn each goat to the east by hand every morning for a week, no matter how they kick, no matter how they resist. You imagine him staggering in the yard, goats bleating in rebellion, neighbors smirking from a distance. The next case cuts sharper. A cobbler, lean and bent, is accused of crafting boots with too many holes for laces. 4 was tradition, 6 was arrogance. His punishment? The boots are nailed to the tavern wall, a sign of shame, while he must walk barefoot in the market until his soles bleed. Then comes a shepherd boy, hair wild from the hills. His crime, whistling while the bells rang. His tune overlapped the church tower's chime, and the priest swore it drowned holy sound. His punishment is humiliating a wooden bit is tied between his teeth, silencing him as he tends his flock. Imagine the sheep wandering freely, their boy herder reduced to mute gestures. A seamstress is called, trembling with a half-finished dress in her arms. Her charge, sewing with coloured thread not approved by the guild. The bright red stitch, she admits, was a gift from her sister. The punishment is as cruel as it is absurd. She must pick out every red thread with her teeth, spit-staining cloth that once held promise. A brewer is accused of foaming his ale with too much flourish, pouring from too great a height. The guild claims he entertains instead of serving. His punishment is public mockery. He must serve watered ale in cracked mugs for 3 feasts, forced to hear laughter each time a patron spits at the weak drink. Next, a midwife is summoned, her apron still spotted with blood. Her crime, whispering prayers during labour that were not on the church's list. She swears the words calmed the mother, eased the child into the world. Her punishment is chilling. She must stand at the next birth in silence, hands bound, forbidden to speak or guide while another prays approved verses. You can almost feel the cold terror in that room. the silence heavier than pain. A woodcutter, shoulders broad, drags his axe across the floor. His charge, cutting down a tree that leaned toward the Lord's land, though the roots were on his own. The punishment, his axe is broken across a stone, his hands bound to his sides as others fell trees in front of him. The forest whispers with laughter at the theft of his power. The next figure is absurdly small, a child accused of playing marbles in the churchyard. Each glass bead struck soil that touched the dead. His punishment, he must carry a sack of pebbles, heavy as his small back can bear, circling the churchyard until he collapses. His tears mix with dust, his marbles gone. A vintner is summoned, his apron wine-stained. His crime, corking his bottles with bark not from the Lord's woods. The punishment. Every bottle is uncorked and poured out, the wine soaking dirt, and he must drink nothing but water for a month. You feel the sting of waste, the cruelty of thirst made worse by abundance destroyed. The absurdity continues. A woman is accused of singing lullabies in a tongue not sanctioned by the parish. Her mother's song, soft and old, is deemed suspicious. Her punishment, she must sing nothing but Latin hymns at night, though her child cries at the strange tones. A cradle rocked by law instead of love. A blacksmith is accused of shaping an iron hinge too ornate for a door that was common. Only nobles may own beauty. The judge intones. His punishment, he must hammer plain hinges for the town. Each strike a reminder of the beauty stolen from his craft. Another parchment unfurls. A fisherman is charged with baiting his hook with bread, food that could have fed mouths instead of mouths with fins. The punishment, he must stand at the riverbank with empty hands, watching fish leap, forbidden to catch them for a week. Hunger gnaws at him louder than splashing water. A young maid is accused of tying ribbons in her hair longer than a hand's breadth. She insists they were gifts from her mother. The punishment. The ribbons are cut and tied around her wrists, knotted tight until the colour stains her skin, as though joy itself shackles her. A merchant, proud and sleek, is charged with stacking his wares too high, towering over his neighbour's stall. Ambition itself becomes crime. His punishment, his goods are toppled into the mud, fruit bruised, cloth soiled, coins scattered, as he is forced to sell what remains at half price. The court grows darker still. A gravedigger is called again, this time accused of laughing when his shovel struck stone. The priest swears laughter mocks the dead. His punishment, he must dig in silence, gagged, sweat dripping, as the shovel strikes hard earth again and again. And at last, an old pilgrim is accused of carrying too many scallop shells on his cloak, proof of false journeys. His punishment is humiliation, each shell stripped from him, tossed into the fire. As he stands bare, his faith burned away piece by piece. The torches sputter, the ink smears, yet the scrolls keep coming. Every act, no matter how small, is written into crime. To milk, to stitch, to whistle, to sing, to carve, to pour, to play, to laugh, every gesture branded dangerous, every breath subject to judgment. The villagers shift uneasily, for they know the net is closing. None are innocent. All are waiting for parchment. The bailiff's staff slams again. Another case, another absurdity, and the night grows longer. The torches burn low, their light flickering across the courtroom stones like restless spirits. The bailiff's staff cracks down once more, and the weary crowd stiffens, backs aching from hours of sitting, yet no one dares to move. The parchment rolls open again, ink shimmering in the firelight, and with it comes another charge, another absurdity, to add to the mountain already piled high. A farmer is dragged forward, his tunic stiff with sweat, hands rough with callus. His crime, watering his field with buckets after dark. The decree insists only daylight watering is pure, for at night water belongs to the moon. He pleads that the crops thirsted, that drought threatened the stalks. The court laughs. His punishment is pitiful, his well is sealed with boards for a week. and he must watch the soil crack and wither. You can almost hear the corn crying for water, the man's pride shriveling with each dry breeze. The next figure is a baker's wife, her hands flour-stained. Her crime, shaping a loaf into the form of a bird for a child's delight. The guild proclaims such shapes mock the holy dove. Her punishment, the bread is torn apart before her, the crumbs scattered for rats, and she is forbidden to bake for a month. Imagine her hearth cold, her child's eyes staring at empty shelves where once sat warm loaves shaped by love. Then comes a mason, shoulders hunched from years of stone. His crime, carving initials into the base of a wall. Pride, the court calls it pride without permission. His punishment is to scrub his own mark away with bare hands until the stone bleeds skin from his palms. The crowd watches as his identity itself is erased grain by grain. Another parchment unfurls. A child, no more than 7, is accused of blowing dandelion seeds in the meadow. The seeds scattered into a noble's pasture, and the decree claims it spreads weeds without license. Her punishment, she must pluck weeds from the noble's fields by hand until her fingers blister. The meadow, once a playground of magic, turned to prison. The absurdity thickens. A brewer is accused of raising his price by a single coin during festival week. The law forbids such profiteering. His punishment, he must sell ale for half the price for a fortnight, his barrels drained by greedy mouths while his purse empties into despair. The next case chills you. A woman is accused of lighting her fire too early in the morning, before the church bell. Fire belongs to God until the bell rings, says the priest. Her punishment, her hearth is doused for 3 days, her family shivering, their meals cold, their breath misting in the air. You feel the bite of frost creep into your bones. A shepherd staggers forward, eyes wild. His crime, carving a flute from a sheep's bone. The decree declares it sacrilege, a mockery of holy relics. His punishment, the flute is burned, and he must walk the fields in silence. Bells hung around his neck so every step tolls with guilt. Another parchment, a fisherman, dripping from the river, is accused of singing while casting his net. Music, the judge claims, lures spirits, cheats fair fishing. His punishment, he must fish in silence for a month. Watched by guards, every hum a risk of lash across the back. The next charge makes the crowd stir uneasily. A weaver is accused of weaving a cloth that shimmered too brightly in the sun. The Lord's steward declares it too noble for common shoulders. His punishment, the cloth is cut into strips, tied around his wrists and ankles like shackles, so every step rattles with wasted beauty. A child again, this time a boy with sticky fingers. His crime, eating berries along the roadside without offering one to the priest. Theft, the scribe calls it, of fruit meant for tithe. His punishment, he must fast for a day, belly aching, while berries rot uneaten in the dust, and the cases keep tumbling. A widow is accused of weeping too loudly at her husband's funeral, disturbing the service. Her punishment, she must wear a gag of cloth during the next burial, her grief silenced before the grave. A blacksmith's apprentice is accused of striking the anvil an odd number of times in the evening, when tradition demands even. His punishment, he must strike all night long, counting aloud until his arms tremble and his throat cracks. A boy is accused of climbing a tree in the Lord's orchard, not for fruit, but for view. The court decrees the sky itself is not his to touch. His punishment, the tree is felled before him, roots torn out, and he must sit on the stump every market day, mocked for stealing a glimpse of horizon. Another parchment. A woman is charged with gathering rainwater in a bucket outside her home. The decree claims rain belongs to God until it touches the soil. Her punishment, her bucket is smashed, her roof stripped of gutters, her family left thirsty in storms. The absurdity grows crueler. A merchant is accused of selling candles that burned too slowly. The court claims deception length without flame. His punishment, He must stand in the square with a candle strapped to his head, flame licking near his hair, until it gutters out. A pilgrim is accused of kneeling too long at the altar. His devotion is deemed false, a show for others. His punishment: he must stand through an entire mass, knees bound, so he cannot bend, faith measured by stiffness. And finally, a boy is accused of laughing at the wrong moment during mass. He swears he thought of a joke, not of the priest. His punishment: he must sit in church with ashes smeared across his face, laughter branded as sin. The parchment curls shut, but more lie waiting, stacked like weapons. You feel it. No act, no gesture, no breath is free. To live in this world is to break law, and to break law is to invite humiliation, punishment, ruin. The absurdities blur into nightmare, a theatre where every villager must play a role, knowing the script is written to crush them. The staff cracks again, another name, another charge, and the night stretches longer, with no end in sight. The hall groans like an old beast as the doors creak wider, a cold gust sweeping in dust and straw. The villagers shiver, not only from the draught but from the growing certainty that no one will leave unscathed. The bailiff's staff crashes against stone once more, sparks of torchlight flaring against the cracked floor. The judge leans forward, his eyes tired yet glinting with satisfaction, as though absurdity itself sustains him. Another parchment unfurls, longer than the last, ink still wet, as if the law had been written mere hours ago, to ensnare its next victim. A farmer with trembling hands steps forward. His charge: feeding pigs apples instead of swill. Apples, the decree claims, are for nobler mouths. His punishment: he must eat nothing but pig slop for a week, while the pigs dine on apples from the Lord's orchard. The crowd murmurs uneasily, imagining the humiliation of chewing rotten husks while livestock feast like kings. A tailor is called next, clutching a bundle of cloth. His crime: stitching sleeves that were too wide, sleeves that brushed against tables and whispered of luxury. His punishment: he is forced to wear his own oversized creation, stumbling through the market with fabric dragging in filth, children tugging at the comical flaps while merchants laugh. Then comes a miller, face pale with flour, eyes darting. His charge: grinding grain too fine. Bread, the decree says, must show grit, for only nobles may eat flour smooth as silk. His punishment: his stones are locked, his wheel silenced, and he must eat coarse husks, chewing until his gums bleed, a reminder that smoothness is treachery. Another parchment is unrolled, and a hunter steps forward, clutching his cap. His crime: whistling to his dog within earshot of the chapel. Sacred ground, the scribe intones, must not echo with whistles meant for beasts. His punishment: he must wear a collar like his hound, a bell tied around his neck, and crawl once around the courtyard before the villagers' eyes. The next case drips with cruelty. A midwife again, accused this time of tying the newborn's first swaddle too tightly. The decree insists only the priest should bind a child's cloth, for he alone can shape its soul. Her punishment: her hands are bound for a day, useless, while she is forced to watch another woman struggle through labour without help. The room breathes heavy at the horror, as though every mother present feels a cold hand on her womb. A tanner staggers in, smelling of leather and lime. His crime: soaking hides on a Sunday. The law calls it work upon the Lord's rest. His punishment: he must wear a wet hide across his shoulders during Mass, dripping foul water onto the chapel floor as the congregation glares. Another parchment curls open. A musician is summoned, lute in hand. His crime: playing a tune with more than 3 notes during Lent. Excess, they call it, luxury of sound. His punishment: a string snapped from his instrument, his song reduced to limp, broken chords. A farmer's daughter is next, cheeks flushed with shame. Her crime: braiding her hair with flowers on a day not marked as feast. Too much beauty, the steward sneers, is wasteful when no saint is honoured. Her punishment, her hair is hacked short before all, flowers crushed underfoot, innocence shorn away with a dull knife. The absurdities multiply. A fisherman is charged with casting his net too close to the castle moat, as though fish within might belong to the Lord. His punishment, his net is torn before him, each thread ripped with deliberate slowness, leaving only a tangle of useless cords. Another villager, an old woman bent with age, staggers forward, her crime muttering to herself in the market. A neighbour swore she spoke curses, though she insists it was only prayers. The court, hungry for spectacle, decrees she must sit in the stocks with a gag in her mouth, so the town may stare at silence where once her voice had been. The judge does not rest. A boy is called, dirt still on his knees. His crime, playing at nights with a wooden sword, striking at shadows in the square. His punishment, his toy sword is burned, and he must bow to every soldier he sees for a week. Each bow a reminder that only real steel earns respect. Then comes a brewer once more, accused this time of frothing ale too high in the mug, wasting drink on the ground. His punishment, he must lick spilled foam from the tavern floor before laughter-filled eyes. A shepherd girl is called, her cloak torn. Her charge, leading her flock too near the noble's rose garden, a single lamb had sniffed the blooms. Her punishment, she must strip thorns from the garden with her bare hands, bleeding until roses lie naked in their beds. And the scroll keeps unrolling. A scribe is charged with writing too swiftly, ink smudging across parchment. His punishment, he must copy a psalm 100 times with sand tied to his pen, each word dragged like stone. Another, a cook accused of seasoning stew with herbs from his own yard, instead of the Lord's allotment. His punishment, the stew is poured on his feet, scalding, while he is forced to eat plain boiled oats for a month. A young wife trembles as she is accused of smiling too brightly at the market. The steward claims such smiles tempt men into sin. Her punishment, she must cover her face with a veil until harvest, joy itself hidden from the sun. The torches hiss, the crowd shifts, yet the parade of absurdities shows no end. The parchment seems infinite, a river of rules designed to drown common life. To work, to laugh, to sing, to pray, to feed, to smile, each act carries a chain. And as you watch, you begin to realize the weight of this theatre. It is not justice at all, but a performance meant to remind every soul that freedom itself is the greatest crime. The staff slams again. Another name echoes. Another crime read. And the night stretches longer, suffocating, as though the laws themselves multiply in the shadows. The night deepens, yet the hall does not empty. The torches sputter lower, their wax dripping like slow tears, but the judge demands more cases, more parchment, more theatre of power. You stand among the villagers, your legs aching, stomach hollow, yet you dare not lean or sigh too loud. Every gesture feels dangerous. Every breath could be mistaken for crime. The staff slams against stone again, the sharp crack echoing like thunder. Another scroll unfurls, its edges curling with damp, and a trembling voice begins to read. A farmer's son is dragged forward, dirt clinging to his tunic. His crime, skipping across the furrows of his father's field. The decree calls it mocking labour. His punishment, he must walk backward through the field for 3 days, each step undoing the furrows his father worked to make, until soil lies ruined beneath the sun. Next, a butcher is called, heavy knife still strapped at his side. His charge, sharpening his blade on a Sunday morning. The priest calls it blasphemy, a sound too close to the ringing of bells. His punishment, his knife is dulled against stone until sparks die, and he is forced to cut meat with bare hands, tearing sinew while customers jeer. A washerwoman staggers in, hands raw with soap. Her crime, singing to herself at the riverbank, her tune mistaken for a spell. The decree insists she attempted witchcraft. Her punishment: her mouth is stuffed with dirty rags from the wash, gagging her until she chokes on the stench of other people's filth. Another parchment unfurls. A merchant is accused of weighing his grain on scales that tipped too lightly in his own favor. His crime might almost seem real, yet the absurd twist comes next. The law decrees all scales must favor the Lord. His punishment: he must sit in the square with empty scales tied around his neck, and villagers fling rotten grain at him as they pass. A seamstress, no older than 16, is dragged forward, tears streaking her cheeks. Her crime: sewing a patch onto her brother's trousers with blue thread instead of brown. Colours belong to order. The steward insists. Her punishment: her needle is taken, her thread cut into shreds, and she must stitch with her fingers alone, skin torn raw until blood dyes the cloth. A baker returns again, another absurd charge. This time, his loaves are accused of being too small. The decree demands every loaf weigh a precise number of ounces, or else it is cheating the soul of bread. His punishment: he must swallow crumbs swept from the tavern floor, choking on the dry dust of failure, while real bread is given to others. Another parchment. A ploughman is accused of turning his ox toward the chapel when he finished his row. The priest declares it mockery, bowing the beast where only men may kneel. His punishment: he must crawl on hands and knees behind his ox for a week, dragging himself through mud, while villagers laugh at the sight of man reduced to beast. A brewer's apprentice is brought forward, shaking. His crime: tasting the ale before offering it to the guild. Curiosity, they claim, is theft. His punishment: his tongue is smeared with ash and vinegar, so every sip he takes for the next week will sting bitter and foul. The staff cracks once more, and a girl is shoved into the circle, clutching a broken doll. Her crime: leaving the doll in the churchyard overnight. Idols, the scribe hisses, invite demons. Her punishment: the doll is burned before her eyes, and she must carry the charred remains tied around her neck like a cursed relic. A mason is next, dragged from his work with dust in his hair. His crime: carving a window frame wider than prescribed by law. Too much sunlight, the decree says, tempts idleness. His punishment: he must seal the window with stone, bricking up his own craft until the room behind lies in eternal shadow. Then comes a vintner once more, his face red with anger. His crime: stomping grapes barefoot, a tradition older than memory. But the guild has declared feet unclean. His punishment: his own wine vat is poured across his head, drowning him in the very fruit he nurtured. The crowd gasps at the waste, mouths watering at the scent of ruined wine. Another parchment longer than the rest. A blacksmith is accused of forging horseshoes too elegantly curved, a flourish beyond necessity. The decree forbids beauty in tools. His punishment: the shoes are torn from the horse's hooves, and he must walk barefoot beside the animal until his soles bleed into the dust. A widow is summoned, her shoulders bent with grief. Her crime: wearing her husband's cloak too long after his passing. Garments must return to the guild. The steward insists. Her punishment: the cloak is torn from her, cut to rags before her eyes, her memory stripped as coldly as her warmth. Another farmer is accused of letting his rooster crow before the official sunrise bell. No bird may summon dawn before the church, the priest proclaims. His punishment: the rooster is taken, its beak bound shut, and the farmer must announce dawn each morning by shouting until his voice cracks. The absurdities pile like stones upon the villagers' backs. A miller's apprentice is accused of smiling while turning the wheeljoy at labour is called vanity. A shepherd is accused of napping in the meadow, his punishment to stand awake all night while wolves circle. A child is accused of skipping rocks across the pond, disturbing the reflection of heaven. His punishment to collect every stone until his arms ache. The parchment does not end. Law after law unfurls, each more senseless than the last, and each punishment crafted not to correct, but to humiliate, to break spirit, to remind every villager that life itself is a crime waiting to be named. The court is no longer a place of judgment. It is theatre, cruelty disguised as order. A ritual where absurdity grows fat on human misery. The staff slams again. Another name rises from the scroll, and the endless night swallows yet another soul. The air in the hall is thick now, like smoke, though no fire burns beyond the torches. It is the smoke of fear, of resignation, of 1,000 unspoken protests caught in throats too dry to utter them. You shift on your feet, the hard stone biting into your souls, and realize you too have become part of this cruel theatre, an unwilling spectator, trapped in the ritual of absurdity. The bailiff, sweat streaking his brow, raises the staff again. The crack of wood on stone rings like a bell of doom. Another scroll unfurls, its parchment crackling like dried skin. The scribe clears his throat, voice hoarse, but the list is endless, and the judge leans forward with greedy anticipation. A farmer's wife is brought trembling into the circle, clutching a bundle of herbs. Her crime? Brewing tea for her feverish child without the priest's blessing. Healing belongs to God, the decree declares. Her punishment? The herbs are ground beneath the bailiff's boots, their scent rising in wasted sweetness, and she must watch her child shiver with fever unaided. Next comes a shepherd, his cloak ragged, staff clutched tight. His charge, counting his sheep aloud in the meadow. The steward insists numbers belong to the tithe, not to common men. His punishment? He must scatter stones into a sack and carry them in place of his flock for 3 days, back bent under the false weight of animals denied to his tongue. A brewer again, pulled forward by the collar. His crime? Drinking his own ale before offering a mug to the Lord's steward. To taste before offering is theft, the law declares. His punishment? He is strapped to a barrel and rolled through the square until bruises bloom across his flesh. Another parchment unfurls. A mason's apprentice is accused of carving a tiny bird into the corner of a wall, an innocent flourish, a moment of beauty. The decree snarls it is vanity, an affront to order. His punishment? The carving is chiselled out while his hands are bound, and he must watch his bird reduced to rubble. Then comes a widow, gaunt with hunger. Her crime? Gathering fallen grain after the harvest cart passed. Scavenging without tithe, the scribe drones. Her punishment? She must kneel in the field at dusk, plucking every stray stalk with her teeth, while villagers whisper at the sight of hunger humiliated. The child is shoved into the centre, barefoot, clutching a wooden whistle. His crime? Blowing the whistle during evening prayer. The priest swears the sound mocked the liturgy. His punishment? The whistle is broken, its splinters pressed into his palm until his hand bleeds, and he must sit in silence while prayers drone around him. A fisherman is called, smelling of river water. His crime? Catching a fish larger than the Lord's own catch. The decree brands it envy, theft of honour. His punishment? The fish is hung in the square until it rots, while he is forbidden to cast a net for a fortnight. Hunger gnaws while glory rots in the sun. Another parchment. A young woman, hair braided, is accused of gazing too long at her reflection in the well. Pride, the steward sneers. Her punishment? The well is covered with boards, and she must drink muddy ditch water for a month, beauty swallowed by filth. Then comes a blacksmith, sweat still fresh on his brow. His crime? Hammering past sunset. The guild insists labour must end with daylight, lest the rhythm of work rival the rhythm of bells. His punishment? He must sit before his forge all night, forbidden to sleep, his tools chained away, while the cold fire mocks his weariness. A farmer's daughter, barefoot, is accused of picking wildflowers for her hair. The decree claims flowers are offerings to saints, not toys for children. Her punishment? She must strip the fields of blossoms and pile them at the chapel door, a meadow's joy reduced to a mound of fading colour. The absurdity thickens with every parchment. A miller is charged with sneezing into the flour contamination, they say. His punishment: he must bake and eat every loaf himself until sickness churns his stomach. A merchant is accused of speaking too loudly in the market, drowning the crier's voice. His punishment: he must whisper for a month. Every bargain struck in breathless secrecy, while customers laugh at his hushed desperation. A boy is accused of climbing onto the chapel roof to chase a cat. The priest calls it sacrilege. His punishment: he must crawl beneath the pews on his belly during Mass, like a worm writhing under the holy gaze. Another parchment unrolls, longer than the rest. A woman is accused of humming a lullaby at night. No music after curfew, the decree insists. Her punishment: she must sit outside her cottage at dusk, with wax in her ears, forced to hear nothing, her silence enforced by pain. A tanner is accused of spilling blood from hides into the stream. The law claims he has polluted sacred waters. His punishment: he must drink from the same stream for a week, the metallic tang burning his throat with every gulp. A gravedigger is summoned once more. His crime: digging too quickly. The dead deserve patience. The priest scolds. His punishment: he must dig his next grave with a spoon, each scoop a mockery of haste. And the scroll keeps unfurling. A girl accused of skipping rope on a holy day. A farmer charged with laughing when his cow stumbled. A midwife condemned for using too much cloth to swaddle twins. A cobbler fined for polishing boots until they shone too brightly. A boy punished for catching frogs in a pond claimed by the Lord's cook. A mother scolded for rocking her child too fast in the cradle, as though speed might summon demons. Every act is crime. Every joy becomes sin. Every necessity is twisted into offence. The punishments are crafted not to correct, but to scar, to leave reminders carved into flesh, spirit, and memory. The villagers shrink smaller with every verdict, their shoulders bent, their voices swallowed, their laughter gone. And you, standing among them, feel the weight settle into your chest. Imagine living in such a world, where law is no shield, no guide, but a weapon wielded for spectacle, where absurdity is power, and power thrives on fear. The staff slams again, the parchment curls open. Another name, another absurdity, another soul, offered to the jaws of a law that has forgotten mercy. The hall has become a furnace of dread. The torches are nearly gone, but instead of darkening, the room seems to glow with the fever of fear. Shadows climb the walls like grasping fingers, and the parchment unrolls as though it has no end, spilling onto the floor, curling over boots, whispering that law itself is infinite, suffocating, inescapable. You feel your breath shallow, your chest tightening, yet the bailiff raises the staff again. The crack echoes through stone, like a hammer striking a coffin. Another villager is dragged forth, a mother, hair tangled, eyes hollow, her crime, rocking her infant with her foot instead of her hands. The decree claims it is laziness, neglect of sacred duty. Her punishment: her feet are bound together for a week, and she must carry the child in her arms day and night, even as she sleeps, exhaustion carving hollows into her bones. A farmer follows, mud caked to his knees. His charge, ploughing a crooked line in his field. The law insists only straight furrows honour God. His punishment: he must drag the plough himself, no ox allowed, his body straining until sweat blinds him, each step correcting the sin of crooked soil. Then comes a young apprentice, soot still on his hands. His crime, wiping sweat from his brow with his sleeve. The guild sneers it is disrespect to cloth. His punishment: his sleeve is cut away, leaving his arm bare to the forge's sparks, skin blistering where fabric once shielded. Another parchment unfurls. A fisherman's wife is accused of hanging laundry on Sunday, the sight of linens fluttering called distraction from prayer. Her punishment: her clothes are soaked in mud, and she must wear them unwashed for a month. Shame marked in every stain. A boy no older than 8 is shoved forward. His crime: skipping stones across the Lord's pond, disturbing the mirror of heaven. His punishment: he must gather stones all day, filling baskets until his arms ache, while the pond lies silent, reflecting only clouds. The absurdities multiply. A brewer accused of singing while stirring his vat music spoils the yeast. His punishment: he must stir in silence for a fortnight. A gag tied to his face, the silence heavier than labour. A seamstress is called. Her charge: stitching lace too finely for a villager's cap. Fineness, the decree declares, belongs to nobility. Her punishment: she must unpick every stitch with her nails, her fingers shredded by thread, lace reduced to useless tangles. Another parchment: a pilgrim is accused of sleeping beneath the church steps, seeking shelter from rain. The priest brands it desecration. His punishment: he must sleep outside the graveyard wall, among brambles and thorns, listening to the wind hiss through the tombs. A woodcutter is summoned, axe heavy in his hand. His crime: chopping wood before sunrise. The forest must sleep when men do, the decree says. His punishment: his axe is locked away, and he must break branches by hand, fingers splintered, palms bleeding. A merchant is next, his cart rattling with wares. His crime: shouting prices too loudly in the square. Noise without order, the crier claims. His punishment: a bell is tied to his neck, clanging with each step, so every villager hears his shame before they hear his trade. Another parchment: a girl is accused of spinning her spindle too fast. The steward declares it unseemly haste. Her punishment: her spindle is snapped, and she must twist thread with her teeth, drool dripping onto wool until it mats. Then comes a widow, clutching her rosary. Her crime: weeping at dawn before the bells rang. Her punishment: her rosary is taken, and she must kneel in silence until her tears dry. Grief measured in enforced stillness. The absurdity grows sharper. A blacksmith is accused of forging nails too small, mockery of craft. His punishment: nails are driven into a block of wood, and he must pull them out with his bare teeth. A baker is dragged forward again, trembling. His crime this time: selling bread too warm. Heat tempts gluttony, the decree intones. His punishment: loaves are left to harden into stone, and he must gnaw at them in the square until his teeth chip. A farmer's daughter, hair tangled with grass, is accused of lying in the meadow staring at the clouds. Idleness, the steward spits. Her punishment: she must kneel on gravel, staring at dirt until her knees bleed. Another parchment rolls open. A tanner's apprentice is charged with spilling lime onto his boots. The guild claims it insults the trade. His punishment: his boots are burned, and he must walk barefoot through the tannery's caustic pools. A fisherman is accused of gutting his catch on the riverbank instead of in the market. Unclean display, the law calls it. His punishment: fish entrails are hung around his neck, flies buzzing, the stench clinging to his skin. And still the scrolls unfurl. A boy accused of whistling to birds. A woman fined for braiding her daughter's hair on a fasting day. A farmer punished for planting seeds out of season. A cobbler charged with leaving his tools on the bench overnight. A priest's assistant accused of yawning during Mass. A maid punished for humming while sweeping. A beggar condemned for bowing too low before the chapel doors. Each punishment is absurd, cruel, humiliating, yet each is enforced with iron certainty, as though the law itself has swallowed reason. The villagers sag under the weight, their spines bending like reeds in a storm. You can feel it too, the suffocating sense that no act, no breath, no blink is free from judgment. And then, as the bailiff raises the staff once more, you realize the most terrifying truth. The parchment has not yet reached your name. The torches have nearly burned to stubs. their smoke curling up into a ceiling blackened by centuries of judgment. The chamber reeks of sweat, ink, and fear. Yet the scribes keep scratching quills across parchment that seems endless. The scroll slithers down the steps like a serpent, coils upon coils, curling around boots, swallowing the stone floor whole. The bailiff's staff slams again one sharp crack, like thunder caught in a coffin, and the next accused is shoved forward. A shepherd, eyes wide, clutching a wool cap. His crime: counting sheep aloud at night. The decree claims his muttering disrupts neighbors' dreams, confuses their prayers, unsettles the silence owed to God. His punishment: he must lie awake every night for a fortnight, forced to listen to others count, forbidden from closing his eyes until dawn. Sleep itself outlawed, rest branded rebellion. The next, a merchant's wife. Bracelets jingling faintly. Her charge: wearing bells in her sleeves on a fasting day. Their chime was deemed temptation to festivity. Her punishment: the bells are sewn into her skirts, and she must shuffle through town with every step ringing shame, each sound mocking her freedom. Then comes a miller, face powdered with flour. His crime: sneezing into the wind. Villagers swear the flour carried through the air, a curse upon the wheat. His punishment: he must wear a mask stuffed with herbs, gagging on bitter fumes, labouring under the weight of superstition. Another parchment. A butcher, apron-stained, is accused of cutting meat into shapes too fanciful. A roast, carved like a swan, offended a noble who declared it mockery of creation. His punishment: his knives are blunted, and he must tear meat with bare hands, serving it mangled, shame dripping alongside grease. A servant girl is pulled forward, hair braided too tightly. Her crime: tying ribbons in a pattern that resembled a crest. The noble house cried, usurpation. Her punishment: her ribbons are burned, and she must wear plain hemp for a year. Her hair a tangled crown of humiliation. The scroll uncoils further. A farmer is charged with watering his field at dusk instead of dawn. The decree claims crops must wake with the sun. His punishment: he must water at midday under the burning sky. Skin peeling, sweat salting the soil. Another figure stumbles forward. A priest's nephew caught skipping stones across a baptismal font. He thought it a game. The punishment: he must kneel waist, deep in the icy font, hands folded, until his lips turn blue, the water leaching warmth from marrow. A blacksmith enters, muscles straining. His crime: hammering past curfew. The law deems iron, striking iron after sunset, disturbance to the spirits. His punishment: his hammer is chained to his ankle, dragging with each step, forcing silence even in motion. Then a weaver is accused of using too many colours in a tapestry. The decree says villagers should not mimic heaven's palette. Her punishment: every coloured thread is cut free, leaving grey holes in her work, a masterpiece gutted by decree. A boy no older than 12 trembles before the bench. His crime: mimicking the crier's voice. His punishment: he must shout proclamations all day in the square until his throat cracks, the crier himself laughing from the shadows. The absurdities spiral deeper. A man fined for walking barefoot on holy ground. A woman charged with laughing during a funeral. A farmer condemned for feeding his dog bread shaped like a cross. A baker punished for cutting loaves unevenly. A mason accused of stacking stones in dishonourable symmetry. The punishments grow stranger, darker. One man is gagged with his own cap for speaking out of turn. A woman is bound to a stool too low for her feet to touch the ground, forced to dangle in discomfort for hours. A merchant must drag his own goods backwards through the market, each wheel groaning in protest. A brewer is shackled to his vat, stirring endlessly while others jeer. And then the parchment curls back, revealing a list of names, dozens, hundreds. Every villager accounted for, every act, every gesture, every breath, mapped against a crime yet to be spoken. The hall feels alive now, the law itself a beast with claws in every soul. You glance down, heart pounding. Somewhere in the endless coils of parchment, you know your own name waits. What crime might they find for you? Breathing unevenly? Blinking too fast? Standing too still? The scroll does not end. It never ends. The chamber feels swollen now, as though the air itself has thickened into wax. Torches spit and hiss, drowning in their own smoke. But no darkness comes, only the choking glow of judgment that will not die. The parchment coils like a serpent that has no head and no tail, unfurling deeper, longer, louder, as though the law itself is drunk on its own absurdity. You hear boots scuff against stone, chains drag, quills scrape endlessly. The beast of law is feasting, and every villager is a course upon its table. The bailiff slams his staff, and the echo cracks your ears like a whip. Another trembling figure is hauled forward, a baker's son, cheeks still ruddy from fire. His crime, eating crust before blessing the loaf. The decree claims he devoured the soul of the bread before its body. His punishment, he must carry baskets of crustless bread through town, mocked for his soulless wares, stomach growling at the scent he cannot taste. A shepherd follows, crook in hand. His crime, carving a heart into the bark of a tree. The priest declares trees sacred vessels, their skin unmarred. His punishment, his crook is snapped in two, and he must herd sheep by shouting only, his voice cracking until even the lambs scatter. Then a musician is accused, lute slung over his back, strings glinting faintly. His crime, playing a note too sweet in a tavern where men were meant to grumble. His punishment, the lute is restrung with cords of nettles, and he must play until his fingers bleed. Every song a lash against his skin. The parchment drags on. A farmer's wife is charged with shaking dust from her rug on the wrong day of the week. The dust fell upon the noble's path, a deliberate cloud of insult. Her punishment, she must sweep the entire square with a broom twice her height, the bristles dragging her shoulders raw. Another man is called, a brewer with eyes too bright. His crime, smiling while stirring ale. The decree insists cheer contaminates solemn craft. His punishment, he must wear a mask of wood, carved with a scowl, until joy itself forgets the shape of his face. A girl no older than 7 is shoved forward, clutching a doll made of straw. Her charge, plaiting the doll's hair in a mockery of noble style. Her punishment, her doll is burned before her, smoke curling like a curse into her hair, and she is told to bow each time she looks into a mirror. The carnival grows. A mason accused of whistling while laying stone. His punishment, stones are bound to his ankles, and he must walk the town square in silence, each step sinking into dust. A tailor condemned for measuring cloth with string instead of rod. His string is burned, and he must guess every length by sight, mistakes punished with lashes. And then the laws slither further, more absurd, more grotesque. A midwife is accused of smiling at a newborn before the priest did. A farmer punished for drawing water from the well while the bell rang. A merchant condemned for placing coins on the counter in the wrong order. A widow fined for speaking the name of her dead husband too loudly in prayer. Each punishment is not just penalty, it is theatre. The laws no longer seek order, but spectacle. The people are not corrected, they are displayed. Their shame is paraded through cobbled streets, their suffering performed for eyes hungry for hierarchy. You see a man crawling on hands and knees, a bell tied to his back, clanging with each shuffle. A woman stands on a barrel, her hair smeared with ash, pigeons pecking grain poured into her skirts. A child holds a wooden board painted with the word idle, forced to walk in circles until his legs tremble. The hall echoes with laughter that isn't laughter, more like a growl, a grinding, the satisfaction of a beast that has swallowed its own reason. You realize the court has become a stage, a grotesque carnival where law is no longer law but performance, cruelty gilded with ritual. And still the parchment unfurls, and still the names are read, and still the punishments grow. You shiver, because somewhere in this carnival of absurdity, you know your own charge waits. Perhaps they will say you stood too still, or blinked too often, or thought too loudly. And when they call you, it will not be law that judges, it will be theatre, and you will be its star. The bailiff slams his staff once more. The parchment curls tighter. The beast hungers still. The hall is no longer a hall. It feels like a dream stitched together with smoke and ink. A nightmare that doesn't know it is a nightmare. The parchment is everywhere now, spooled across benches, draped over the altar, curling around torches until it looks like the flames themselves are reading from the law. The villagers, bent and trembling, are no longer merely judged. They are swallowed by the stage of absurdity, their lives puppeted by rules that bend nature, mock reason, and laugh in the face of mercy. The bailiff slams the staff again. The sound is thunder, drum, heartbeat. The next villager is dragged forward, a fisherman dripping with river water. His crime, casting his net against the current. The decree says rivers flow in God's ordained direction, and to resist their pull is rebellion. His punishment, he must walk backward into the current at dawn, weighted with stones, until he collapses, the river deciding whether he drowns or crawls back to shore. A seamstress follows, hands trembling, needle pricking her palms, her crime, tying a knot left-handed. The guild proclaims it a sign of the devil, the sinister hand. Her punishment, her left hand is bound for a month, fingers stiffening, while she must stitch only with the right. Every crooked seam condemns her anew. Then comes a farmer, clutching a basket of eggs. His charge, owning a chicken that laid 2 yolks. The decree claims it is an omen, unnatural doubling. His punishment, the chicken is paraded through town, crowned with thorns, before being slaughtered. He is forced to eat it raw, yolk staining his lips like guilt. Another parchment curls open. A shepherdess is accused of singing lullabies to lambs. The law insists only human babes deserve song. Her punishment, her voice is silenced with ash smeared across her lips, and she must remain mute until rain washes it clean. A merchant's boy is hauled forward, tears streaking his face. His crime, tripping while carrying coins. The decree calls it disrespect to currency. His punishment, each coin is sewn into his clothes, heavy as chainmail, and he must wear it for 7 days, jingling with every move, his body bruised under the weight of wealth. The carnival of madness deepens. A brewer is accused of allowing foam to spill over his cup. His punishment, he must drink from a cup drilled with holes, never quenching thirst, ale spilling down his chin, drowning him in mockery. A widow's crime, allowing her cat to cross the churchyard at night. The decree declares it a witch's omen. Her punishment, she must chase shadows with a broom, striking at nothing, until dawn breaks and she collapses in exhaustion. A blacksmith is charged with forging a horseshoe that fit too well. The guild insists no work may be perfect, for only God creates perfection. His punishment, the shoe is nailed above his door, and he must strike it with his hammer each morning until it bends out of shape. Then a boy, barely old enough to walk, is accused of laughing during a storm. The priest insists it mocks heaven's wrath. His punishment, he is placed beneath the eaves during rainfall, forced to sit in silence while thunder cracks, joy chained under the weight of fear. The absurdities spiral beyond the body, beyond the mind, into the realm of the impossible. A farmer is accused of harvesting grain that bent in the wind before the bell rang. His punishment, he must plant each stalk back into the earth, roots or no, bowing to the wind as though it were a priest. A tanner's wife is condemned for spilling water onto her shadow. The decree claims shadows must remain unbroken. Her punishment, she must carry an empty jug across the village square, filling it only with air, her shadow mocked as incomplete. A mason is charged with laying one stone atop another without saying a prayer. His punishment: he must dismantle his wall, stone by stone, until his hands bleed, whispering prayer into each pebble before stacking them again. And then worse still, a farmer is accused of walking beneath the moon without a hat. The law warns that moonlight on bare skin invites madness. His punishment: he must wear a hood even at noon, stifling under its cloth, seeing the world only through a slit of shadow. The punishments no longer merely wound the flesh or shame the soul. They unravel reality itself, bending lives into grotesque shapes, twisting ordinary acts into crimes against creation. The court has transformed into a theatre of impossibility, a carnival where logic is butchered on the altar of law, and in the silence between punishments, you feel something shift. It is not only the villagers on trial. The parchment, endless and alive, seems to watch you too. Every breath you take, every thought, every blink, it could be written down, judged, punished. You wonder if, in this place, even imagining freedom might be declared a crime. The bailiff raises the staff. The parchment curls tighter. The beast hungers still.